my usual audience prefers me at my absolute spiciest, and this is my spiciest, snarkiest, most mean video of the year, since I'm a bully and I'm mean to authors, yada yada, whatever people think of me. I would like a fucking drum roll, please. Wait, is this my channel's version of the Super Bowl? Should I have my cat come in and do the halftime show? Artemis, you're on. It's time. Just kidding. She's still grounded from that one video where she fought the other cat. Super Bad Books 2022, motherfuckers. Another year bites the dust. This year I read lots of shit that I loved, actually, contrary to what you upsetty spaghetti folks in my comments think of me and complain about all the time. But it's true, I read a lot of bad books. Before we even start, I want you to comment down below, pause me, and tell me what you think that my #1 worst book of the year is going to be, what I'm going to name it. I have like, I want to say 12. Yeah, 12. So tell me what you think #1 is. It is true though, I read a lot of bad books, so we're gonna go through 12 of them. We're gonna start from the least worst and go up to the absolute #1 worst book of the year. All of these are 1.5 to 1 stars, by the way. I left out the 2 stars this year and the 3 stars. I also left off any nonfiction by fundies because that's low-hanging fruit. Alright, it's fucking time. Let's do this. Coming in at number 12, the least of the worst, but still terrible, Guild by Raven Kennedy. I did a review on this, but I also reviewed the sequels, but I actually liked the sequels. I hiccuped saying that because my body rejected it. And those are totally different experiences, I tell you what. Guild is the least worst because while it has some weird talk about semen, its biggest crime is that it simply did not need to exist. The book had, honest to God, no purpose. Everything that happened could have been smashed into book 2 and it would have been not a waste of time. This is a King Midas retelling about a young woman named Oren, like Lauren with the L cut off. She is the prized gilded pet of King Midas, and she is gold. But she realizes he's actually an abusive piece of shit. This series honestly got better, in my opinion. It's like the good kind of trash. It's like, you know, when you sit down and you eat an entire bag of Bugles and you're like, I kind of regret that, but it was delicious. The rest of the series is like that. The first book is literally just a waste of your fucking time. It's not a bag of Bugles. It's a bag of nonsense. The later books had like, I actually liked some of the reveals. I did like some of the self-reflection that Oren does in later books. And I think that the author did actually depict the intricacies of like psychological abuse pretty well, which was honestly kind of shocking. But the first book got 1.5 stars. It's really not a good book, but I like the rest of the series. But oh my god, that first book was so nonsensical and convoluted. She's actually turning off a lot of readers who might like it just because it's so bad. And people in my comments were like, oh, you have to continue the series. First of all, a book should stand on its own, and just because I like the rest of the series does not mean that that first book somehow retroactively gets a better star rating. It's still terrible. It's objectively bad. Like, there's nothing good about it. It opens up with an orgy, which was a choice. Anyway, 1.5 stars to Guild, 12th worst book of the year. Number 11 was Crystal Keepers by J.M. Arlen. J.M. Arlen was an author who behaved very badly earlier this year. He threw a huge Reddit tantrum multiple times. I covered him in authors behaving badly, and then separately I tried to review his book because I was interested in, he said he spent like 7 years on the book and that he had thrown a bunch of thousands of dollars at editing. He threw a huge Reddit tantrum. He like he misrepresented what some readers said. He created a bunch of sock puppet accounts to support himself. He put me on Reddit and then used his sock puppet accounts to boost himself up, and then he got kicked off of Reddit for doing that. It's so funny. Anyway, he likely will never be an indie author of merit because of all of his bad behavior, but I did try to I tried to read his book. That shit was, oh god, so convoluted. It was overwritten yet also underwritten. That's an achievement, kind of. Cringe to the highest degree. The plot goes something like, I believe our main character's name was Mamie, and she lives in a tower kept away by a king who we never saw, and she finds out from some girl who comes to the tower to try to steal a crystal from her, who then she accidentally kills, that the king is bad and he's keeping like these little fairies in jars in a closet essentially. You never hear from these fairies. You never hear from almost anybody because it's just badly written. She runs away from the king and then she goes to some guy's house. That guy promptly gets murdered, or not promptly, actually I think there was like a time jump. It was very odd. So then she runs away. I think the guy got murdered. She runs away to some mountain, somehow portals into our world, gets hit on by a kid whose first instinct is to ask if she has a boyfriend for some reason, fights a bear for all of like 10 seconds in what JM referred to as the best bear scene. Then she lies dormant for a while and like the ancestor of that kid who asked, "Do you have a boyfriend?" comes and finds her, and at this point I DNF'd. I hate doing DNF reviews. I'm a completionist, but I had to DNF this. This book had no business being published. This man threw a tantrum, and for what? I wish the bear had killed the main character, taken the crystal, also eaten that, portaled into their fantasy land, and killed everyone there too. Then I might have called it the best bear scene, and I might have actually finished the book. Instead, it was terrible and I DNF'd. Number 10, The Butcher and the Wren. Actually, it's over there and I'm too lazy to go get it. Oh my god. Again, another book that had no business being published. This book was about a notorious, well it's not, serial killer and the medical examiner who tries to catch him. But what this book was really about was just the creator of a serial killer podcast or true crime podcast, Elena Urquhart. She runs the podcast Morbid. She just wanted to write serial killer fanfic and not do it well. So you get a bunch of like name drops about real serial killers and factoids about them, and sometimes fake serial killers, like she brings up Silence of the Lambs. It's so lazy. She didn't even come up with her own lore. The book had absolutely no continuity, threw in random meaningless scenes just to bulk up a very short and pointless book, and then ended it abruptly. It was a huge waste of my time, and Elena Urquhart needs to apologize to all the trees that died to become that book. She should also refund everybody who bought it. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about all three of the ones that I just talked about, Guild, Crystal Keepers, and this, what is it called? The Butcher and the Wren. I have videos on, I actually have videos on every single one of these books. Yep, every single fucking one. So if you want to see any of my in-depth thoughts on any of the books I'm going to talk about, I have dedicated videos to every single one. Okay, coming in at number 9, We All Fall Down by Rose Jabo. What was this? God help me, because I don't even know what the fuck this book was. There's 4 main characters and a magic city, and for some reason there's people murdering cops, and you're supposed to care, and one of the characters throws one of the other characters, who's a black guy, under the bus for the cop murders, and it just gets like swept under the rug and not dealt with, which was weird. And there's a German Shepherd who runs a gang. It's confusing and weird as fuck for no reason. Don't read it unless you would like to induce a migraine. Buy it for somebody that you hate, I guess, if you're gonna buy it at all. Absolutely stupid, just nonsense. Number 8, The Mister by E.L. James. Internal screaming. This is a book about 2 people with absolutely no personality who are fucking. Oh, but it is an E.L. James book, so we know that there is a damsel in distress and a rich man with mommy issues, and that's all the characterization they need according to James. I still demand answers on why SpongeBob pajamas are sexy, why E.L. James hates Albania so much, why I'm supposed to think that the man who leads this book, who is the color of paper, is supposed to be sexy, and why he's a DJ, and why did the climax of the book have E.L. James sending the main character, whose girlfriend just got human trafficked, back to Albania, going to a bar, and why is E.L. James explaining every single thing that is happening at this bar, including the demeanor of the waitress? Why does E.L. James write? Why couldn't she have just stayed on fanfic websites? I will never know peace. 500 pages of kill me. Number 7, Silkfire by Zabe Allure. Oh, good fucking grief. This is about a courtesan named Korishiza Brightstar who lives in a society where women rule, and he has daddy issues, and also his daddy is in a position of power, like politically, and also he turns into a dragon sometimes because one time he was fucking somebody and they were fucking and they fell through rubble, but they were still fucking. And while still fucking came upon a dead god's shrine, and while still fucking, the dead god came into Korishiza's body while Korishiza came on the dead god's altar, and thus he became part dragon. This has all the confusion of We All Fall Down by Rojabo combined with vitriolic hatred of women, also dinosaurs, and bad blowjobs. Oh, and the phrase "we have fucking at home" said unironically. The plot makes no sense. The whole thing is like vaguely orientalist, and it's a like, see, women can be just as bad as men thing. If you want more in-depth thoughts, Lou Reading Things, one of my best friends, has a video on it that is very funny. I have a video on it too, but I think hers is better, so if you want to watch it, I will link it down below. Number 6, After by Anna Todd. Woo! Okay. So girl goes to college and meets a Harry Styles knockoff named Harden, has sex with him, fights with him repeatedly because he's a dick for 500 pages, only to find out he had sex with her on a bet. The whole book has no plot and is 500 pages of misogyny, both external and internalized. I do have a whole video on it, on how I think that it could have gotten better and everything that went wrong with it, and I actually have watched all the books. I've read all the books and watched all of the movies, and they're just bad, and a lot of it is funny bad, but a lot of it is just bad. Shockingly and needlessly just packed full of ableism. We'll never understand what Anna Todd has against mental illness. Oh, number 5, Light Lark by Alex Astor. First of all, to this man in my comments who was like, how dare you, a new author. She's not a new author. I know she swindled y'all very effectively to make you think she was, but she has now been published traditionally 3 separate times. She should, at this point, if publishing worked how it should, know how to craft a plot and a book with things that make sense. Unfortunately, she doesn't, and as a book reviewer, I'm going to point it out because I review books. The fact that I keep having to explain this. The reason this gets number 5 is simply from a craft perspective, mostly. There's a couple things that I felt were like icky in it, like stereotype stuff, which this man, again, was like, I don't care about stereotypes. I'm sure that stereotypes have no effect on you, my guy. And there's like tokenization. I talk about it in my review. A lot of that is not good, not the worst thing I read this year on that front, but still not great in that aspect. But really, the problem is that from a craft perspective, this is so incredibly poor. There's no sense to be made from anything in here. The magic system does not make any sense. The world itself does not make any sense. I have a feeling that if Alex were to be interviewed and asked about these things, she would not know how to answer them because she just keeps getting asked about, oh, how did you get, your book published from TikTok? I don't care about that. I mean, like, good for you, you got published, but I, as a reader and a reviewer, I want quality books, and this is not one, and it could have been, it should have been. This is your 3rd time getting published. You should have picked up on ways to get better by now. Instead, this book has, again, a magic system that does not make any sense, a world that doesn't make any sense, descriptions that don't make any sense. It's quite clear she was flying by the seat of her pants, and there was little to no editing being done here. The fact that things were explained like the sun is a yolky thing, and the ocean is a churning soup, and the land was crumbling like a scone or something like that. It's like, first of all, This prose leaves a lot to be desired, but it also made me question, like, are you just writing hungry? Somebody get her a fucking snack. Even the synopsis does not accurately portray what is in the book. It says it's supposed to be about an island that appears every hundred years and all the rulers have to fight to the death, except none of that is true. The island is accessible every 100 years. It doesn't appear. People live there all year round. And the rulers don't all have to fight to the death. One of them has to die. But there's also a bunch of loopholes that never get explained. Plot holes is probably a better term for it, where it's like you can just choose to not show up to these games. So I don't understand the stakes, the world, the magic, and honestly, I really don't think that Alex Astor has a good grasp of like the mechanics of the world that she created herself. Again, I think if you were to ask her, she would be like, yeah, hey, did you know it's always been my dream to be published? And I was rejected from like 170,000 publishers before I made a TikTok about my book, and now it's gonna be a movie? We know, but like I'm a book reader and I want a good book. Can you explain the lore? Or there are so many moments in this book where I'm just like, what? There's more holes in this than Swiss cheese. They made this into a movie. If they went by the book, it's gonna do as poorly as Allegiant did. They're gonna have to change a lot of stuff, and even then, the bare bones of it are so wonky, I'm not sure what they can do with it. I have a full review, so does my friend Maddie, and Lou is going to be reviewing it soon, so if that's done, I'll link it down there. When it's done, I'll link it down there. Lou literally just texted me. She's reading it right now, and she just said, Yoki thing was not a good way to describe the sun. Girl, I am literally filming my worst books of the year right now, talking about Lark, and I just said when Lou's done reading this, I'm going to link her video on it down below. But another YouTuber who did a actual who is working on currently a chapter by chapter overview of Lark by Alex Astor is Julian Greystoke, who also did chapter by chapter on The Night and Its Moon. She's brilliant. She's a writer herself, and I really like the way that she lays it out from like a writing perspective. So I will leave her link down below. The Night and Its Moon by Piper CJ is number 4. This is about two women who grew up together and were separated and are allegedly in love, and at least one of them is trying to find her way back to the other. Luce said crumbling like a good empanada. Not the empanada. The air was stale like 6-day-old bread. In reality, the book is just about a white girl who is a special snowflake. Literally gets called a snowflake. Everyone is in love with her even though she treats everyone like shit, though I don't think Piper sees that. I think that everybody with sense who reads the book sees that Amaris treats everyone like shit, but I don't think Piper sees it that way. It's quite clear from the way it's written that Amaris is well loved by Piper. And of course, one of the people in love with her is the ambiguously brown character Nox, the Knight to the Moon, who gets whipped in literally chapter 2 because Amaris's special snowflake white skin cannot be damaged, but Nox's brown skin can. Then there's a bunch of clear rip-offs of The Witcher. It's overwritten to the point where you want to fucking pull your hair out sentence after sentence to convey the same thing over and over and over. Yet it's just words, and it's not like she can write like Laini Taylor or Sylvia Moreno Garcia or Alison Saft, where you're like, wow, this is really beautiful prose, this is a beautiful way to describe that, I've never thought of it that way. Instead, it's just like, okay, I get your meaning, you don't need to tell me over and over. The themes are wishy-washy. Sometimes it feels like she's trying to take on patriarchy, and sometimes she's blatantly feeding into it. The romance is clearly one-sided on Nox's perspective, and Amaris doesn't give a shit about Nox. There's a bunch of weird racial stereotyping in it. There's a lot of weird shit about sex work in it. There's sexual assault that gets glossed over in really uncomfortable ways. And again, it is blatantly, obviously ripping off The Witcher. I read both versions of it. I have 2 videos on it. I read the self-published version and the version that Bloom Books took the self-pub, allegedly fixed some stuff, so I have both versions. It's just not good. It's just not a good book, and I'm really confused as to why publishers have to be, I mean, it's not confusing, it's annoying, because what they want is money, and they see people who are cash grabs and they're like, I'll publish you. It's really fucking annoying. Number 3. Zodiac Academy. Oh god. I'm gonna be very blunt. These people cannot write. These Twisted Sisters cannot fucking write. Their writing is fucking awful. It's awful. Their writing is terrible. Their success makes no fucking sense. This is about twins who, much like in Holly Black's Folk of the Air series, get taken to fairyland and their parents are dead and they get relentlessly bullied. Why is this called Zodiac Academy yet Sagittarius is left off of this entirely? The plot has nothing to do with the Zodiac. In fact, there is no plot at all. The plot is nonsense. The characters are empty shells. Just that, you know, the authors can like string along to different places so that different, you know, like fantasy scenarios can be acted out, but they're not actual people. The descriptions are so fucking funny. Like at the very beginning of the book, she's like, she goes into the room quiet as air. Wow, profound. Whatever the opposite of Laini Taylor's writing is the Twisted Sisters. This book is shit. It shouldn't exist. It's Winx Saga fanfic. There's literally a character named Tori Vega. Is that the twin that strikes up an inappropriate relationship with her teacher? I don't even remember anymore. It's bad. Coming in at number 2, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Ah! Why? This is an incel manifesto written by an incel about a guy who behaves like an incel. Wade is the best of the video game players, armed with an encyclopedic knowledge of everything. And Wade, our main character, has an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that men loved in the 80s. And with this knowledge, he wins the video games and he stalks a girl even though she explicitly told him to leave her alone. But he thinks he knows what's best for her because paternalism. And she eventually gives in and they kiss at the end of the book. But not after he feels so sorry for himself that he hires a robot sex worker. I had to hear about a teenage boy hiring a robot sex worker because he felt bad for himself. The way that women are spoken about and to in this book is completely inappropriate. The whole book is just stupid and pretentious, even though all of the knowledge could be, you know, none of it is like Ernest Cline's like own shit. He didn't come up with fun stuff on his own. He relied on things that, you know, other people who are living in, you know, the US, Canada, and some of Europe probably already know about. But like outside of that, I wonder if anybody really would enjoy this book, because if you don't know 80s trivia, like so much of the book is like spent explaining all of this shit from the 80s that basically only Ernest Cline and people like him care about, which is like you bulked up your book by just explaining stuff that you didn't even come up with on your own. Ugh. And I like video games. I like Pac-Man. I grew up playing Pac-Man. But I don't need to read a book about Pac-Man. I don't need Ernest Cline to explain, oh, and now the main character is playing Pac-Man and he plays the good game of Pac-Man, and then it's like, what the fuck is this book? All of this extraneous detail interspersed with this main character cyber stalking a girl who said, leave me alone. Too many of us women have been that girl, and I don't need or appreciate Cline writing a version of it where it ends with the girl, oh, she comes around because he's a nice guy. And again, I really just don't need Pac-Man explained to me in excruciating detail. But the number one most horrible, awful, ridiculously bad book that I read, the most dusty, no good, dirty piece of garbage that I read in 2022. First, I have to sing thank you for being a friend to my patrons, possibly for the last time in 2022. We're moving up to another year. Yay. Okay, first to those paying my therapy bills: Amanda, Eric, Jill, Sierra, Harley, Lex, SJ, Molly, and Zachary. Thank you for being a friend. This year's therapy comes in the form of not going to see family that I have cut off contact with, even though it's New Year's, even though it's Christmas. I'm not doing that shit. I have boundaries. I'm keeping them up, and I'm gonna smoke some weed. After my kids go to sleep though, because that shit's gonna knock me out. And to my potato starch Marxists: Aiden, Allison, Andy, Anita, Ray, Brittany, Caitlin, sorry, I gotta scratch my face, Caitlin, Carlin, Celia, Chris, CJ, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Diet Goth, Dorian, Ebby, Eden, Elise, Aaron, Gracie, Horror Goose, India Inks, James, Jen, Jillian, Jules, Kate, Katie O, Kylie, Kelsey, Quinn, Laura, Marcella, Model RK300, who, by the way, if you want me to call you by a different name, can you let me know down below or on Patreon? Because if you want me to call you by your first name, I totally can, but I have you as you know, the name that you sign up on her Patreon. By the way, if any of my patrons want me to change what I refer to you as, let me know. Anyway, moving on. Morgan R, Moth, Nicole, Paige E, Paige P, Peggy, Reba, Ren, Rowan, Sammy, Sarah, Shannon, Shiny, Sean, Talia, Winter, Ursula, and Ryder A. Thank you for being a friend. If you want to join Patreon, the link is down below. You get early access. Sometimes we vote. Mostly we chit chat and do the early access thing. I really love my Patreon community. Also, fun surprise, I am for my patrons creating, well, I'm not creating it because I don't know shit about it, but my husband is creating a Discord so that we can do Discord. So yay, if you want that, that's gonna be a thing that he's currently working on it. So thank you for being a friend, and that's my Patreon, links down below. Okay, but the number one most horrible, awful was The Fucking Pawn and the Puppet by Brandy Jecker. This is an indie book that the TikTok girlies were so fucking pumped for. Someone DM'd me as it came out and was like, hey, have you heard about this? Could you read it? And I was like, sure. So I cracked it open. Oh God. Woo boy, nothing prepared me. First of all, this author is a bad person. She tried to cover the obvious harm she knew she was doing regarding writing mental illnesses, plural, into her book, both demonizing and romanticizing them by putting trigger warnings at the beginning. Ma'am. No. Her main character, Skylena, who for some reason all these bad authors are obsessed with twin white girls. So Skylena is living in a fantasy world for some reason, and she goes to the asylum that her sister used to work at. I think her sister committed suicide. She meets patient 13, whose name is Dessen, except he has multiple names because he has dissociative identity disorder. But that's not the only mental illness she wrote terrible rep for. She also wrote in things that I have, like OCD. And she wrote the OCD character being a child killer, which is a trigger for me. So that was compound trauma. Oh, I'm laughing to hide the pain. She also just wrote bad rep for suicide ideation, eating disorders, wrote some weird and random murders into the book. One of them was a murder because his parent, who was a trans person, sexually assaulted him as a child. Oh, and the sister of our main character, her queerness gets demonized, so that was fun. This book is just so rife with harm. I was shocked. And the parts that aren't harmful don't make any fucking sense. The world, the government, the asylum itself, all of it is so nonsensical that if I didn't know any better, I would think that it was written by an AI or by somebody who just doesn't know anything about anything at all. Like about how politics and governments or countries or literally anything works. I also have mentioned on this channel that not only do I have and struggle with eating disorder, I have since I was in high school. I have had OCD. I can think back on it starting around the time that I was like 7 or 8, but I was institutionalized when I was in high school. I got something called Baker Acted, which means I was institutionalized against my will. It's kind of a ridiculous story, but basically I got sent to the psych ward. So books set in asylums, because y'all think it's like dark and sexy, it just really makes me uncomfortable. And I think that's just like a really disgusting idea. So that is the worst book that I read in 2022. I get that you wanted to romanticize mental illness, but next time keep it on Wattpad, where all the bad Joker and Harley Quinn fanfic lives. Am I already blocked by this author despite literally never interacting with her in any way, shape, or form? Yes, I am. Hit dogs sure do holler. So that was the worst of 2022. Feel free to commission me to try to get the worst book of 2023. My commissions list is linked down below if you are interested in that. If you, I guess, hate me, let me know what your your worst book of 2022 was and what you hope to see in 2023 from me on this channel. So, okay, thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Make sure to let me know down below that I am a big, huge author bully and I'm the worst and I only read things I hate, yada yada. Okay, thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye!